Robinson's the runner at third with nobody out. Seaver pitching. Low outside fastball hit hard to right center field. Here comes Swoboda out of nowhere. Nowhere. He's made the most incredible catch in World Series history. Holy cow, Frank Robinson has tagged up and scored the tying run from third, but you just witnessed one of the great plays in World Series history.
Welcome to The Catch with Ron Swoboda, and I'm Chris Champagne. This is the first episode of The Catch with Ron Swoboda, one of the all-time New York greats. We're going to talk about Ron's career and baseball in general. Welcome, Ron.
Good to be here, Chris. And you?
Okay, man, thanks. It's always great to see you, Ron. Now, one of the things about the format that we're going to do on the podcast here is we have a trivia question to start the show, and we'll end the show by answering that question. And I'll ask you the question again at the end, okay?
All right, go ahead.
What is the first time that baseball was mentioned in print in the United States?
Oh, that's a good one. That's deep dive into baseball history, yes.
A, 1798, B, 1811, C, 1803, or D, 1791. Okay, it was in a newspaper in Massachusetts.
Don't look at me like I was around
No.
then.
No, I know better than that. I know that you were born in 1812.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, that will be an interesting answer. I like that.
Well, we're going to start off today with talking about the magical Miracle Mets 1969 season. Now, going into the season, I'll just lay a little groundwork for some of the people who might not know. The Mets were only like 8 years old at that time. First team they had was 62 when they became legendary for losing the most games ever. And before the 69 season, they had never finished higher than ninth and in a 10-team league. Now, that was 69 was an expansion year. So the Padres and the Expos came in that year, and also it was the first year they had the divisional playoffs. So there are a lot of things happening then.
Yep.
You know, and do you remember going into that season, considering that the Mets they'd lost 100 games 5 times, I think, in the 6 seasons previous, and had never finished higher than ninth? Was there some optimism that y'all would be kind of like maybe breaking through it and doing a little bit better than?
I think there was a sense. I mean, once you win the World Series, everybody said, "Yeah, I saw it all coming."
Sure,
and I'm well, you should have told me. But I really believe in 1968, Gil Hodges' first year as manager, the whole culture around baseball changed. This guy was no nonsense. Former Marine. You either do it Gil Hodges' way or you hit the highway. And I sort of experienced that after 1969. Gil and I were not warm and fuzzy in our relationship with one another, but there was no doubt that he was a brilliant baseball mind, full of all of the sabermetric information, but it was all logged up in his brain. It was amazing how he stayed on top of the game. And in 1969, once we got rolling a little bit, did the things in terms of baseball managerial decision that made a difference in what was going on. But in the beginning, I don't think the New York Mets organization, I don't think Gil Hodges, I don't think anybody there had any real sense of what this team could do. And the reason I say that is if you go back in Baseball Reference and look at all the lineups we used in the first couple of months, Gil was using this guy in right field, that guy in right field, me in right field, Art Shamsky at first base, looking for something. They were clearly looking for something to see, what is this team all about? I don't think Gil knew what this team was all about. And we weren't giving him a whole lot of good information in the early going because we just kind of slogged along through April and May and just sort of, for the franchise, it wasn't discouraging in the sense that we were bubbling around 500.
Right, so you all did a little bit
but
better.
we were not, we were not in any way envisioned as somebody who was in the hunt. We were not in the hunt.
Right.
And strange as it happens, in June, which was when the trading deadline was back in that day in 1969. In late June was the trading deadline, but May going into June, the New York Mets reel off like 10 or 11 wins in a row. We start out at Shea Stadium in New York, the great Shea Stadium, which is no longer with us, but we win an entire series against the West Coast teams. We beat the Dodgers, we swept the Giants, we swept the Padres, coming through Shea Stadium in a home series. And that was enough to get somebody's attention. And then we went on the road and continued the thing, and it rolled into like 10 or 11 games, as I said. And in the process, we became relevant. All of a sudden, we're 6 games off. And the Mets, that was when the New York Mets made the trade for Don Clendenon. The power-hitting first baseman had spent most of his career with the Pittsburgh Pirates, was studying to be a lawyer, was a damn good hitter. And he was kind of wallowing in Montreal. Gene Mach wanted to get his hands on Rusty Staub. And Rusty Staub was with the Astros back then. Rusty Staub, one of the better players that ever came out of New Orleans, Louisiana, where we live, where we're doing these podcasts. So Clendenon, they wanted to trade him to Houston, and he did not want to go. He felt like that wasn't an organization he wanted to be a part of. They had a hitting coach there that had been with the Pirates, and he felt like the guy was a bit of a racist, and he wasn't going. And he could make that stance because they throw him out of baseball back then. He just continues his legal career and moves on with his life.
Right.
So he was a guy they couldn't threaten.
Yeah, he was very interesting.
So what they said, yes. So what they said to him was, get in shape. We'll figure out where, they want to trade you. We'll figure out where you're going to go.
Well, so basically around late May and in June, you got Clendenon. I mean, is that the kind of time when y'all really kind of started to think that maybe we can do this, we can win this thing?
Well, I think what I'm, suggesting here is that we were within 10 games of the lead. That, to me, for the Mets' history and what, concepts people had of the franchise, that was pretty.
It was, oh yeah.
That's a pretty radical
that was high
move.
cotton, yeah.
That's a radical move, and we're all of a sudden, expressed ourselves as a possibility in this hunt. We're relevant, and I think that's why they made the Don Clendenon deal. It ended up being 5 or 6 players for one. And the only pitcher was Steve Rogers. They wanted to get into our young arms, and we were loaded with great young arms back then. That was our strength. We needed a little more offense. When they grabbed Clendenon, to me, it was the organization saying, all right, we need to make this move because we need to make ourselves better, and we need to maybe see where we can take this thing.
Well, before we get in deeper into the season, I wanted to give you this little anecdote you may be aware of or not, but y'all lost the first game of the year 11-10, opening day. And this was what one of the writers in the paper said the next day. He called the Mets the masters of lingering death.
No,
So well, sure. I mean,
look, if you played in New York back then, there were so many really good writers, sports writers.
Sure. Yeah.
And, And they were going to write baseball in a way that made it more fun to read about and more fun to watch. And the Mets, were starting to make baseball a little more interesting with our success. And you have to remember when the team lost 120 games in their inception year in '62. That thing spawned books. I could walk you into my office here and show you 10 or 12 books.
Right.
That were about the Mets and how awful they were that first year. When the White Sox, eclipsed the Mets record, it resulted in 0 literature, nothing really to speak of.
Well, in New York, you're in the literary capital of the world.
Well, and I think that's
America.
what made a difference. But yeah, the writers there were interesting guys. We spent time with them. They protected you if you asked them. If you said, they'd go out to dinner or go out and have a beer with them or something. But you didn't feel like you were being mined for material that would be all over the internet like it would be today. I don't
Sure.
think players today, in any way, shape, or form, can do that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a different world in many ways.
Oh,
The world
fundamentally
Yeah,
in
right.
every way.
Well, you talked about the winning streak in May, and I
Yes,
saw
May
something-
into June, really.
Right. Well, during that streak in May into June, there was a game where you hit 2 home runs off of Steve Carlton.
I thought that was later in the year.
Well, I think it was in. Well, it might have been later in the year, but that's when you really took off, maybe.
I was
At the end.
playing a little
That might have
bit
been in
there.
August, maybe.
I had I did have later in that season, we went into St. Louis for a makeup game, and this was, I believe, was in August, and we, we were well along August, I think, at the latest, and we went in. Steve Carlton's a great left-handed pitcher. I did, when we became a strictly platoon team, except for a couple of positions. Cleon Jones played in left field. Tommy Agee started every day in center, and Jerry Grody was the catcher. But at almost every other position, we platooned. Buddy Harrelson at shortstop.
Shortstop, that's right. Yeah.
But everybody else, we had a platoon thing going, and that was Hodges who really made a decision based on the guys he had on the roster that this would make us better.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up, that you did use the platoon system quite a bit there. It was kind of integral to what you all were doing.
Yes.
And from a fan's perspective, it's like, from a day-to-day basis, that's an interesting way to be a fan, actually.
Yeah, players don't like it. If you ask Art
yeah.
Shamsky, one of the guys that I shared right field with, and we actually had, if you put us together in one player, we had a pretty damn good year in right field.
Yeah.
When you add it all up, we probably drove in 100 runs between us.
Right.
That ain't bad back in that day for your right field position. And Sham was, Sham was a pretty good left-handed hitter, and I think he hit 300 for the year, and he could do those numbers. I drove in a few runs. But I wasn't going to be a 300 hitter. But yeah, the platoon worked for us because it not only kept you in the know of when you were playing, but it made you better because everybody was playing. So if they needed you as a pinch hitter in a game, everybody was getting good time at the plate, and so you have everybody kind of tuned up, and that was a strength.
Yeah, I would think so. Once you got to the series and to the playoffs, everybody was had been playing, and everybody was involved. So everybody that was, that would have been, I think, a big plus.
Yeah.
Also, y'all were, I think y'all were 10 down on August 14th out of first place.
There you go.
So you made a pretty big run there, one of the biggest runs ever, actually.
Well, it was combined with the Chicago Cubs, who had led the,
Collapse,
Chicago Cubs and Leo DeRocher, who thought he invented baseball. When just as a little note here, when Gil Hodges during World War II was with the Marines on Okinawa, watching people die. DeRocher was, dating starlets in Hollywood and acting the big deal.
Yeah.
And Hodges and none of his coaches had any sort of regard for Leo DeRocher. They didn't like him, and it was obvious in the dugout. They didn't like one another.
Oh, that's interesting.
And when we were competing with the Cubs, and that was the team you had to beat down the stretch, and those That series with the Cubs was like uber contentious.
Yeah.
Those games all turned on one little play here or there, and I think we barely edged the season with them. The season series rather with the Cubs, and all of the games were close, and all of them were contentious.
Well, you hear a lot about, in the press anyway, as a fan, which would be me, of people who don't like each other. So it's interesting to really get to hear that this does exist as not just a ploy,
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you what, it bubbled over one day in Shea Stadium. The Cubs were in late in the year. It's an important series. They had a right-hander on the mound, and Tommy Agee was the leadoff hitter for the Mets in the bottom of the first inning. First pitch is, neck level and knocks Tommy Agee on his back. And Jerry Koosman is pitching for the Mets, and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be ugly, because Koosman was a killer, and Ron Santo led off in the top of the second inning, and the first pitch to Ron Santo was right in his ear hole, and it was Jerry Koosman's best fastball. Tom Seaver, who had great stuff, might have knocked you down, might have thrown it behind you, might have done something. Jerry Koosman threw it, and Santo somehow got his arm up, and it hit him on the forearm, and he screamed and it sounded like he broke it.
Yeah.
It was horrendous, and everybody in both dugouts realized this is going to get dangerous, because you don't want to play knockdown with Jerry Koosman out there.
Yeah.
I mean, he will get you.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of those situations that defined and changed the way things were going to happen with us. We weren't taking any crap, and we had guys that would enforce that. And so if you want to knock us down with that little crap you're throwing up there, Jerry Koosman will show you what you get knocked down with. And, guys' eyes got big when that happened.
Well, now we're talking about, we're talking about Gil Hodges, and we were talking before, and DeRoche, to get into that little anecdote. Before we go a little bit any further today, I wanted to talk about, you had an interesting coaching staff on that team. I mean, you had got, in other words, this is my era as a fan, so I kind of know these names, and these would people you get baseball cards of.
Except for Eddie Yost, who was the third base coach. Everybody else was a former Dodger at one time or another, and that was Hodges. They were all Hodges. Joe Pignatano.
Yeah.
And Rube Walker was the pitching coach.
Right.
Pignatano was in the bullpen. And, they were all tight with Gil Hodges. Eddie Yost was a guy from the Washington Senators.
But he was known as the walking man, wasn't he, when he was a ball player?
He was, absolutely.
Yep.
He'd get on base guy,
Right,
He
right.
was a get on base guy any way you could.
What was his position? You remember, which is?
He was an infielder, third baseman.
No, I mean, I meant as a coach.
He was the third base coach.
Okay.
Yeah, and not only that, but he was the guy that hit me hundreds and hundreds of line drives and ground ball, and I was trying to make myself into a better outfielder than I was. And Eddie Yost, there were days when he didn't want to see me showing up, because I wanted to take a bunch of 10 or 15 minutes of boom, 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 line drive, ground ball. Do it very intense, but not long duration workouts. And I felt like those line drives and ground balls and all were all things about 150 feet away. The idea was hit me balls that I got to make quick decisions on and react to the ball off the bat. And I think it was a pretty good routine, and it made me a better outfielder.
Yeah, well, it paid off, evidently.
It did. It did, absolutely, and I think there's a direct connection with that work I did with Eddie Yost and the catch I made in Game 4 of the World Series.
Right, absolutely. I was reading about it. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it just goes to show you that you work up to that point that you don't even know is coming, really, and either you're ready or you're not.
Well, I think it tuned me up as an outfielder, and I felt like after And I invented those drills, basically.
Oh, okay.
I was like, that's how I wanted to do it. I never took fly balls, other than a few during batting practice and whatnot. The big looping fly balls, that wasn't a problem. The problem was balls that you had to move on and make decisions on, and charge or not charge, turn the right way to get back on them, that kind of thing, react to the ball.
Was Barrow on that staff too?
Yogi was first base coach.
Okay. Who's the hitting coach? I mean, was there one or
There
just
wasn't
everybody?
a hitting coach.
Okay.
I mean, if Yogi was the hitting coach, his philosophy was, if you can't hit it, maybe you don't swing at it. What about 2 strikes, Yogi? Well, then you might have to swing at it. And you're like, well, that clears that one up. Now, bless his soul, Yogi Berra was, Yogi Berra didn't know how to hit. He just could hit.
Yeah.
He couldn't explain it to you.
Yeah.
He couldn't explain it to you because he had no strike zone. He could hit the ball up in his face. He could hit anything you threw, but he couldn't explain mechanically why he was able to do it. He just could do it.
I wonder today if how Major League Baseball is. I mean, I know growing up, you read all these stories about they on the trains, like they used to be in the old days, talking
Think about
baseball
that.
all the time.
Think about that.
Yeah, talking all the time. I wonder if it's the same. If they do talk about baseball a lot in today's game. Between counting their money.
I think today's ball players probably have different sort of ways of talking about the things that constitute the game of baseball today, and they have the weight training and the analysis of your swing and computer analysis and all of that stuff, and every coach, every team has 2 hitting coaches now. We didn't have one. The game is so much different in that way, I believe. And these guys are smarter about it today as a result.
Well, now there's always a business decision to be made. I mean, when you're making $1 million, you have to, and when I say business decision, I don't mean not throw yourself out there, but I mean, you have to really calculate what you're doing because you don't want to blow this.
Well, yeah, and first off, when I was a rookie, I made $7,500 a year.
Yeah.
That was with a bonus for being in the big leagues.
Right.
Minimum salary, which was also maximum salary, was $6,000 in 1965 when I came up in the big leagues. Now it's over $200,000 a year. So and if you do a present value on what we made, it's exponentially greater now. And of course, if you're, most people in baseball now are making around that minimum salary, unless you move to a certain level where you can make a $2 or $3 million a year. I mean, and that's not an oddity in baseball.
No.
The oddity is the guys making 30 million or so, those guys.
Yeah, well, it's getting a little less of an oddity too, even as we speak.
Boggles my mind just thinking about it.
But getting back to how much you prepared, tried to prepare for the fielding by doing those drills that you invented and having your coach work out with you like 15 or 20 minutes a day before the games, I assume. We're going to get to, in our next podcast, we're going to talk about the series, but I'm going to jump a little bit ahead to the series. There's the catch, which you say that you practiced a lot, which helped with that. And the other thing about that series is the bunt that J.C. Martin made.
Yes.
And you think about that, in spring training, I assume you start at some point with the bunt, and how much do they bunt and how much do they practice it? It comes down to that play won the game.
It's interesting because in college baseball now, Division I and elsewhere, those guys bunt a little bit in college baseball. They use the bunt. They'll use the bunt with a runner on third base. They'll do they'll do a safety squeeze or something to try to get the run in or make contact. Just make contact, because they don't have the quality of players. When you have the quality of players they have in the big league, with the power potential of most guys, they just don't feel like the bunt adds something. They're not going to give an out now. Don't give an out.
Right, but if you get to the seventh game in the World Series and it's the bottom of the ninth and you need that
Then
bunt.
you might, but you might. And I just think real good players, they practice it.
Yeah, well,
They practice it, I guarantee you, but they don't use it as much. I mean, the other day, Juan Soto for the Mets bunted, and everybody is convinced he gave himself the bunt because the Mets weren't going to give him the bunt.
I'm going to ask you the bunt, okay.
But it caught everybody by surprise, and it stood out because who would have thunk it?
Yeah, well, as we're at the end of the show here, we got about 5 more minutes, and one of the things about, we talked about the platoon system that they used, and that got everybody involved.
Yes.
And so when you needed them, they were ready.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, you were playing on a regular basis.
And the other thing is, you talked about it a little bit, I mean, you had some pretty stellar young arms on that team. You had Koosman and Seaver, and you had Nolan Ryan, Gentry.
They were Seaver and Koosman were 1 and 2,
Right.
and then Gentry. Ryan had a lot of Army Reserve meetings that year, so he was in and out a lot.
Right,
But I mean, he was Nolan Ryan. He was Nolan Ryan back then.
yeah.
And you saw what he did in the playoffs and World Series. And that was the only World Series Nolan Ryan was ever in. He played 27 years in the big leagues,
Yeah.
which is ironic as well. But, Gary Gentry was a good hard throwing right-hander, fearless. Jamie McAndrew was Jim McAndrew, I should say.
Right.
Hard thrower. Tug McGraw out of the bullpen was the left-hander. We used Tug McGraw to close, and Ron Taylor was a right-hander who just passed away recently, who was probably as amazing as any of the Mets that year, because the guy was an engineer who, after his baseball career, took a doctoral medical doctor degree, and was eventually the team physician for the Toronto Blue
No
Jays.
kidding, yeah.
He was an incredible guy, incredible mind. But we had some amazing guys, amazing arms. We had pitching.
Yeah, well, that came in handy when the World Series came around. Well, thank you, Ron. We're at the end here of our first episode of the podcast, The Catch. I'm Chris Champagne. We were New York Met great Ron Swoboda. And we started off the show with a trivia question, so now I'm going to reiterate that question and have you take a guess at it. The first time that baseball was mentioned in print in the United States, was it A, 1798, B, 1811, C, 1803, or D, 1791?
How about 1811?
Okay, it was 1791.
Really?
Yeah,
Baseball.
baseball.
Wow.
Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and the context of the story was that it was being outlawed by the city in the city limits because people were doing it too much, and they needed to
Taken
stop.
away from their work
From their
and
work.
whatnot.
Yeah.
Baseball. I'll be darned. 1791.
91. I understand, and some of the things I looked up previously, that they actually played baseball at Valley Forge when they were with Washington when they were waiting to.
Wow, I did not know that. I thought that was, the game of, the girls' game of Rounders. Was what baseball came from, English girls' game, and that game evolved into baseball. Rounders was even referred to as baseball, where you actually threw it up yourself and you hit it with a little bat, but the ball was a little miniature version of a baseball. Really interesting, and that's the derivation.
Well, we'll get into this in a later podcast, I hope, but baseball was known as a New York game, early on as well, so that we could get into that since, so then, as we had the first catch, you won the pennant, and you had to go, you won the division, I should say, then you had to go
Yes.
play the Braves, so we'll start with that in the next podcast, we'll just do a little bit about the NLCS, and then we'll get to the
Yes, there
series.
is some interesting aspects of that. We'll
Okay.
talk about it.
All right, well, thank you, Ron. You listened to The Catch with New York's Met great Ron Swoboda. Thank you.